Hello.
Hi.
Ew. I always like it, like, to see how you enter. Like, I really am waiting for the day that you come on and you just start, like, busting a move. Really think that everyone needs to see your moves more.
It's got to be animated. What was the last time I did the Vogue?
You did. So what is your move this week?
It was just hands up. What's that emoji?
I think they call that jazz hands.
Jazz.
How's it going? Happy Friday.
Yes, happy Friday. It was a good week.
What have you been up to this week?
This week, I attended a virtual policy academy with the Ohio Governor's Challenge team. And the key focus area was the veterans population. And it was such a great week. A lot of information, a lot of back briefs, but it was great because it kind of aligns with our Ohio strategic plan, specifically Strategy 4, which is my strategy that I work on.
Nice. Hi, Dad. Thanks for joining us. Have you? So I was in like a couple meetings, this week, and I feel like the overall theme, like, so tell me if you have been struggling with this, and anyone watching, let me know if you've been struggling with this or if I'm just like totally crazy. But all week, I had no idea what day it was.
My goodness.
I knew Monday was Monday, but then on Tuesday, I was like, oh, it's definitely Thursday. Like, what? No. And then on Wednesday, I thought it was Friday. I also thought it was Thursday. Like half the day I thought it was Thursday, half the day I was like, oh no, it's Friday. And then yesterday, in our meeting with our guest coming up, I think I was like, all right, so just send that to me on Thursday, like the day before. And the two of you looked at me and I was like, oh my God, it is the day before, isn't it? Like, I just feel like the world feels so scrambled right now. Am I the only one who feels that way?
Oh no. I keep hearing people say this year is dragging. I think it's flying by. I can't keep up with the days too. It was earlier in this week. I normally take my youngest daughter to gymnastics on Tuesday, but I got my days mixed up. And she's like, and of course, every day she asks, "Are we going to gymnastics tonight?" And I was like, "Yes." She got all excited, but it was Wednesday. So I'm like, "Oh no, that was last night. I'm sorry." And of course, it upset her.
Rika said it's called Blur's Day.
I'm going to use that.
And I'm going to start using that, Rika, and I will definitely credit you.
Yeah, it's just all blurring together. I can't keep.
So your daughter goes to gymnastics. That's cool. Is it any different than what she was normally doing?
No, it's not. Now they were shut down for a while. Well, actually, yeah, it is a little different. Her class size, cut in half. I mean, I think on average there's like 6 to 7 students. When back in January, February, there were like anywhere between 12 and 15 students in her age group. Now, obviously, some of them have like moved on to a different age group, but it is a little different. Before my wife and I can both go and watch, but they've kind of narrowed it down where they recommend that only one parent per student, which makes sense. That way we can align with social distancing. Right. So we just rotate. So
is that change hard on your daughter?
I mean, at first it was, but once they start flipping and cartwheels, she doesn't notice.
Well, that's cool. That's nice. I mean, I'm glad that she gets to still go out and do things like that. I feel like there's so many programs that are still shut down, and these poor kids you don't know what to do with them.
I know. My oldest daughters, one of them is a teenager and the other one is 19. So she's going to college. So it's a little different for them. But Nora will be 6 in November. So she's still at that, hey, let's do this, moving on from one task to the next.
Right. Now, does she understand everything that's kind of going on?
She does. And just yesterday while we were driving, she's like, when is this virus going to end? And I was like, that's a good question. That's a really good question.
Great. We wonder that all the time.
Yes.
So how did you and your wife, if you don't mind me asking, how did you and your wife kind of explain, because it's such a confusing topic. How did you explain it all to your daughter?
At first, we were like, hey, there's some changes going on, and we can't do this, and we can't do that. She didn't quite understand it. But she's like, well, I want to go here. So our original plan was, we were like, well, honey, you know, the police said that we can't do this. That worked for about 2 weeks. And so she was like, well, what's wrong with the cops? And then we realized, okay, there's really nothing wrong. So we've got to update this story. Like, the police didn't do anything wrong.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Yeah, because you don't know how to explain it. I mean, like, my son's too, so I really haven't had to explain it. I used to say, oh no, the park is going night-night. We can't go there. It's sleeping. But that doesn't work on a 6-year-old.
No. But now she gets it. I mean, we had the conversation over and over, over and over. She kind of gets it now. And plus, I mean, let's just be honest, it's been going on for a while that, you know, it's becoming like the new norm.
Yeah. So. Let's see, we've been, not to bring everyone down with this, but we've been in the stay-at-home order since March.
Yeah, it was somewhere around mid-March. Yeah.
I think the last time I visited the office, it said March on my calendar. So that's what I'm going by. So March, April, May, June, July. We're almost in September. We've almost spent half the year.
I know.
Wow, that's crazy.
I know. The reality hit me the other day, you know, when they were talking about the changes with Big Ten football, sports in general.
Right.
And when I got tunnel vision on the word football, and then it dawned on me, they're like, wait a minute, you're talking about fall sports, as in where did summer go?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think recently, did governor sign a new order that parents can watch high school sports, they can attend it?
Yeah. I mean,
but we're still not having football for Ohio State, correct?
Yes. But I'm an optimistic person, so we'll say that is to be continued.
Now, I read your tweets. How are you feeling about possibility of no Ohio football?
It's different because it's one of those things where I try to establish something where I completely disconnect to my everyday, what we do with OSPF and just other things, you know, as a parent. And to me, sports is always that thing where outside of the gym where I can completely disconnect, focus on, you know, whatever sport it is. I like all sports, but I especially like football. So that's why I'm trying to remain optimistic. I can only watch a replay of a game on YouTube so many times.
Right. I understand. Well, I mean, I get it. I was hoping my father, I, and my brother had a trip planned to New Orleans in November for his birthday. And when we went there, we were going to go to a Saints game because me and my dad are big New Orleans Saints fans. My brother's a Giants fan, but he'll go to any game. So we were going to go. And I said to my dad, I don't think that's going to happen anymore.
Yeah.
It's a weird time.
It sure is.
I don't think that any of us thought back when all of this started that, you know, there would be a possibility of us not watching our sports.
I know. You kind of look at things at the moment. You're like, hey, this situation is rough, but this is currently happening right now. We're not worried about, 30 days, 2 months from now.
Right.
But I mean, it's kind of the new norm.
Exactly.
So, at least we've got baseball and basketball.
Baseball.
We did have hockey, but that's done for Columbus.
That was a short season, right? I speak as someone who's not a hockey fan.
Well, it's still going on, but unfortunately, the Columbus Blue Jackets were eliminated.
Okay.
So the season for them is now done.
I'm so sorry for all of the Jacket fans out there. And please don't hate me for not knowing any of that.
No, you're good. I mean, I enjoy hockey, but it is of the sports that I watch, I have the least amount of knowledge of that sport. And I admit that.
I really love going to hockey games.
Oh, yes.
Like,
Yes.
I think those are fun. I can't sit and watch hockey on the screen. I can sit and watch football and I can sit and watch basketball. But like baseball and hockey need to be in person for me. Otherwise, I just can't get into them.
Yeah, it is different when you're there, especially for hockey. Sometimes it's quite hard to figure out what's going on because they're moving so fast on the ice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just pure talent out there.
Oh, absolutely. I love watching them move.
Yeah.
Can you hear them doing construction?
I can. I wasn't sure what that was.
At first, like before we went live, they were like pounding on some rocks. Now it sounds like they're sawing through the doors. Stay tuned. A bulldozer just might come plowing through here.
Well, that would be trending on Twitter then.
Right? Well, there we go. That's anything for likes, So do you want to tell everybody about our guest today?
Yes. So today our guest is Jamie Fairfield. He is a person that I used to work with the Delaware and Moore County HelpLine in Delaware, Ohio. He is a violence prevention educator and a subject matter expert on just about everything I can think of.
That is quite the introduction, Jamie.
That is a lot of pressure from that introduction.
Yeah. So I set it up here.
No pressure or anything.
Yeah, no pressure at all.
But if you don't mind explaining to people, so you work at HelpLine in Delaware and Monroe County, correct?
Yeah, Delaware and Moore County.
Morrow, sorry. I feel like an alien sometimes when I'm talking to people. But so what exactly do you do there?
So my primary job as a violence prevention educator is me and our two other prevention educators that we have. We go into high schools and middle schools in Delaware and Moore counties, and we do a 4-day violence prevention program with students. So we talk to them about healthy, unhealthy, and abusive relationships, kind of give them the traits that all three of those types of relationships have, give them some things that are reasonable expectations to expect in a healthy relationship, give them some red flags to look at for potential abusive relationships or unhealthy relationships. And then we also talk to them about consent and coercion and what those two terms mean and what needs to be present for there to be consent between two people in a dating relationship. And then we also, on the last day, we talk to them and give them some bystander intervention skills where if they see bullying or abuse or things like that happening, how they can safely step in. And we also give them some safety planning skills to kind of help them if they or a friend is in an abusive relationship for how to kind of be able to safely plan for what to do if that happens.
That's some heavy topics. Yeah. What are kind of like the students' reactions when you kind of come in and you're like, hey, we're going to talk about how not to be in an abusive relationship? Like, what are their reactions to that?
A lot of that depends on the age groups that we talk to. Like when we go to a 6th grade classroom and they tell them that we're here to talk about relationships, the 6th graders are always afraid that I'm there to do sex ed with them. And when they discover that that's not what it is, almost anything else is better by comparison. But one of the things that we just do to help all students is by starting with healthy relationships and good things and positive things. That helps get them engaged and begin to build some trust for when we get to the heavier topics later in the week. Older middle school students, like 8th graders and high school students, they're not usually nervous about us being there. They usually need some time to be able to feel us out being there before they feel comfortable asking questions or things like that. But by the time we get to the 3rd or 4th day, they usually are comfortable with doing that, and they usually ask really good questions. And I think that in general, students are very eager for somebody to come in and have conversations with them about issues that are very much relevant to their lives. Right. And the fact that I'm not a parent and I'm not a teacher makes it a lot easier for them to receive that information from me and makes it a lot easier for them to even forget a lot of times that their teacher is in the room with them, and for them to begin to have some of those conversations and ask some of those questions and get that information that they really need.
Yeah. Now, sixth grade, are you focusing? It's been a while since I've been in sixth grade, but are you focusing on, like, when you say healthy relationships, like intimate relationships, or are you just focusing on healthy relationships in general, like friendships and your relationships with people at home?
So we always try to make our content appropriate for the age that we're speaking to. So when we talk about healthy relationships, the two types we focus on are dating relationships and friendships. Because of the relationships we have, those are the two relationships that we get to choose.
Okay.
And so we want them to focus on the ones that they have some control over to kind of help them in thinking about the choices they make. So in our sixth grade classroom, I usually do have a bit more emphasis on friendships, because especially the first couple of days for them to feel comfortable. But we also do talk about dating relationships with sixth grade students. We oftentimes will tell them that many of them may not be dating yet or may not feel ready to date, but this is information that we want them to have for when they are ready to have those types of relationships.
Hey, I have a question. So when you're having this conversation with these kids, are any other conversations come up that, hey, this is a stranger, let's just talk about this? Or do they talk about like their favorite video game or a TV show? Just to kind of, get through that area of ambivalence of who is this guy?
Oh, yeah, that absolutely happens sometimes. And to kind of help them with that, if I see kids coming in wearing sports jerseys, I'll ask them about that team or talk to them about sports. And since, like Jason, I'm a really big sports fan. If I find out from like either them telling me or through like folders or things they have, I'll ask them about video games or movies or things, so that they have some things to talk about up front that they feel comfortable with. A lot of our conversations are not really me telling them things. A lot of our presentations throughout the whole 4 days is me asking them questions. And so I will a lot of times ask questions that open up things where there are definitively safe answers for them to give, to kind of help them feel like they can become part of the conversation and kind of begin to feel secure in sharing during the time that we spend together.
Now, obviously, given all this, what's going on in the world, you're not able to get into the school. So how are you guys able to kind of continue doing this work? Or are you able to?
And not being in the classroom has been probably the hardest thing for me about the entire quarantine process. I mean, very much miss being in classrooms, but beyond the fact that it's not particularly safe for us to go in right now, the schools that we're in all have no visitor policies right now to begin the year anyway. So we're in the process now of adapting and creating some online content to be able to share with our teachers and for them to be able to share with our students. A couple of weeks ago, we sent out some polling information to our teachers to ask them essentially a whole bunch of questions about what their needs were, when they would like some material, what kind of material they would like, what topics they would like. And so from there, we are beginning working on a healthy relationships module that we're going to send out to our teachers to be able to share with their students, that kind of has a combination of videos and some other kind of interactive activities, because like most adults right now, whenever they're on Zoom, it's kind of it's a huge zone out moment for a lot of us. That's also true for kids right now, probably even more so, I would imagine. And so we're kind of wanting to give them some things to do while they're watching it, so it's not just a passive hit play, watch it until it ends sort of thing. So that's what we're working on, like right now, is trying to put that stuff together to be able to get that out to our schools and teachers as soon as we can.
That's awesome. Yeah, I would definitely think that like knowing those signs and the red flags, especially with you not being able to go out even more, you never know who they could be trapped in. I say trapped, who they could be quarantined with.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that we're just mindful of in general is making sure that we're selecting material that is safe for kids to receive, because we're operating on the assumption that any kid that sees this may be getting it at home and may be getting it at home in a distance learning only district
Mm-hmm.
where they don't have access to some of the types of questions that kids normally have the ability to ask when we're giving the material. So we're wanting to be very mindful of the environments that they're in right now.
Yeah.
Hey, Jamie, is there a concern that the clubs that you're involved with, that they don't have access to the training that you're going to provide? Because with the way the new norm is, we kind of make this assumption that everybody has a computer, everyone has internet access. Now, I understand that schools are helping provide some of that stuff, but we just can't make the assumption that everybody has access to these things.
That's right. And that's a real challenge for many of our students. Just access in general for a lot of things. And so one of the things that we've done is we've sent out some additional polling information for teachers, asking about platforms and asking about access and things of that sort. And before we finalize the exact format that we're going to produce everything in, we're kind of giving them a little bit more time to give us that information, because we want to make sure that we're reaching as many students as possible.
Rika Knight has wrote in and they said that you are doing such important work. So I definitely wanted to make sure we told you that. What are some signs that youth and students can kind of look out for that they are in an abusive relationship?
That's a really good question. So one of the big signs that we teach students to look at is what we call isolation or exclusion, which is that people who are abusive tend to try to get their partners to drop methodically all the other people from their lives, especially people like close friends or adults that are in positions where they can like extracurricular activities, getting them to drop other activities and trying to make that person their entire life. That one is a little bit tougher for people who are in the relationship itself to notice, and so we also make sure to teach kids that that's something to look at and notice in friends, siblings, cousins, things like that. And if they notice them dropping lots of people or lots of clubs, that is something worth talking about and telling them what they've noticed and why they're concerned. We also talk about emotional abuse and the ability and how they kind of drop people's self-esteem out, and being part of being in an abusive relationship is that the person who's being abusive tries to drop the other person's self-esteem so that they believe that the person they're dating is the only person who would want to be with them, or the abusive friend is the only person who would want to be their friend. And so again, if they notice their own self-esteem dropping significantly, or again, somebody who they're close to, that happening, that's another example of a red flag worth looking out for. Also, what we call kind of reversing or denying the blame for things, where no matter what it is, the abusive partner always makes it the other person's fault, even if it's something where the abusive partner has been harassing this person, their partner, over messenger, over text messaging or social media constantly, and the person goes like 15 minutes without responding, and they blow up at them and then turn it around with, well, if you had just answered me, none of this would have happened. Kind of teaching them to see that's not really their fault, that is the fault of the abusive partner, both for their out of proportion reaction and for their unreasonable request that somebody be available all the time to them over social media or over the cell phone, that, you know, people have the right to take breaks away from things, to have time to themselves, to just say, I don't really want to talk right now. That is something that people have a right to do when they're in a relationship.
So I have a question. So given, you know, looking at what you and your organization do from a bigger picture, obviously what you do requires a high level of resiliency skills. And I'm not talking about the students, I'm talking about you and your peers. So what are some things that you have implemented for yourself specifically that one helps your resiliency? You know, how do you bounce back in the face of adversity while doing this work? And two, what is it you do to implement and make a priority for self-care?
Yeah, those are really good questions, and it is really important that people who work in areas of prevention be able to have resiliency and self-care for themselves. So one of the big things that I do is I love reading, and so I try to make, after work, the workday's done, and this is something I'm really glad I've been able to continue doing during quarantine. I make it a priority to read for about an hour to 90 minutes every day, from something that's fun, that I enjoy. I used to be an English teacher before I did this for a living, and so reading is something that's always been very much part of what I like, and so I make priority for that. When there is sports on, sports also helps a great deal. And then also movie watching helps me a lot. I try to not watch a lot of content that has to do with my particular subject matter. I try to avoid things as much as possible that are about sexual assault or youth dating violence or things like that. If I do want to watch things that have those as part of it, I try to watch those on easier days or days when I'm not working. And then also with movies, I also started a thing for myself about 3 years ago now, where I do what is kind of like a weekly movie, where for the whole year I pick kind of a theme or a genre, and I watch one movie, and it's something that I really like, and so I watch one movie from that either on Friday or Saturday night every week, and kind of do it as like a larger project for myself. So, like for this year, it's been action movies, which 8 months into 2020 was absolutely the right call for this particular year to pick action movies.
I love your Facebook post about this stuff, from the record. I love how the way you illustrate it.
What is one movie that you have watched since quarantine that you loved?
So there's been lots of them, but one of them that really stuck out was, somehow, despite the fact that I was a teenager in the 90s, I had never seen the movie True Lies. And I watched it for the first time like 2 months ago, and I still don't understand how I made it to my age without having ever seen that movie.
Awesome. And then, on the opposite end, has there been any movie that you've watched in quarantine that you were like, that was a total waste of my time?
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of which one it was that I watched that I particularly hated. I'm sure later when I talk to some of my friends and tell them I couldn't remember this, they're gonna have a list of things that I sent them texts about that I hated. But I can't think of one off the top of my head right now.
Fair enough. Going back to the abusive relationships, you mentioned how, like, one of the signs is, someone not answering right away in social media. Have you seen, in your conversations with students, have you seen if social media has kind of heightened these issues in creating bad relationships, or has it helped?
I think that it has certainly become one of the central pieces of this particular issue. And it's one of the things that students frequently have the most questions about. I think that social media has really opened up different expectations for access than existed when I was a teenager. And even though so one of the big battles that we have is that even though the opportunity for more access is there, is teaching students that just because that opportunity is there does not mean that they have to want to do that.
Right.
It also just opens up lots of other opportunities for crossing boundaries and for creating things that are just not healthy behaviors. So respecting boundaries and privacy is one of the big things that we talk to students about when we talk about healthy relationships, that they have a right to expect their friends and the people that they're dating to respect their privacy, and that they have a responsibility to do that for their friends and the people they're dating. And so that's all kinds of things when we look at social media, right? That's not looking at somebody's phone without asking them for permission first, or even simple things like asking permission before we share stories that name one of our friends by name, or sharing pictures of our friends of any sort without asking them for permission first, right? Because just because we let our friend take a picture of us when we were all hanging out together doesn't mean that we feel that we want everybody to see that. And that's one of the important pieces in a healthy relationship, is being able to say, I don't want that picture of me shared. And then being able, as the person who took the picture, to also hear and respect that that person doesn't want it shared, and not sharing it if they don't want you to.
Right.
So it's fair to say that these issues have secondary and tertiary effects, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which is a good segue for the question.
Oh, okay. Rika was saying, can you speak to how your work ties in with suicide prevention?
That's a really, really great question. And there are several ways that I think that our work very much ties in with each other. I mean, they certainly, both dating violence prevention and suicide prevention share a lot of the same basic risk and protective factors, right? So like one of the big risk factors is not having safe problem solving strategies. That's absolutely true for both my field as well as for your field. One of the big protective factors is connection to a caring adult. That's true for both of us. But also in ways that they're very much connected to each other is that students and teens, and just even adults who have experienced dating violence or have experienced sexual assault, the odds for them having seriously contemplating or attempting suicide goes up pretty significantly. I read a statistic just the other day that among youth who have been victims of both dating violence and sexual assault, that 50% of those youth have considered suicide. That's just a significant number, and that's obviously much higher than the general population. And then one of the other big ways that it's connected is that I know one of the big populations that you try to reach in suicide prevention are men and boys, for all kinds of reasons, because men and boys are less likely to seek help when they need it, because all of the numbers show them being more likely to die by suicide. And so one of the things that we try to do is we try very hard to reach boys. So in addition to our school programming, I also have a boys group that I do at schools. That's a 10-week program with boys between the ages of 4th and 6th grade. And a lot of what we do as part of that group are things like teaching them about empathy, teaching them that it's okay to express emotion, teaching them how to feel safe and to safely express emotion, teaching them how to have assertive communication so that they know how to stand up for themselves and others without being passive or without doing something that's going to get them in trouble with an adult or cause them other problems by being too aggressive. So I think there's lots of ways where the two fields very much are working towards very similar goals, and working towards trying and working with very similar populations in many cases.
That's a great question. So is it fair to say that, and this is one of topics that you and I have a lot, is it fair to say that toxic masculinity is a key component in this?
It absolutely is a key thing with that. The phrase toxic masculinity itself is, it can be rather problematic, because a lot of times people interpret that to mean that being a man or a boy or being male is toxic, when that's not what it is. A conference that I was at just last week, they replaced the term toxic masculinity with patriarchal masculinity, which I really like, because that puts the reframe on ideologies and systems instead of putting it on individual people. But it absolutely is this expectation that comes from a lot of society's views of what it means to be a man or be a male, of that it means not being able to express emotion, that it means not being able to admit if you have a problem, not admitting weakness, always feeling a need to be the absolute best at everything all the time. And that absolutely leads to a lot of these problems. It's one of the things that the boys that I work with in my boys group, and even some of the boys when I am in the 4-day program, talk a lot about, is about those expectations.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, the boys I work with will tell that they feel trapped by those expectations, that they want to be able to come across as somebody who's empathetic and caring about other people. And they want to be able to talk about things that hurt their feelings or upset them or are bothering them, but that they oftentimes feel like they can't do that. And that's one of the big things, especially in boys groups, that we try to do, is begin to help them feel like that it is okay for them to do that, and give them some spaces to practice being able to do those sorts of things.
Now, is there anything that, because again, with Boys Club, you can't get into the schools right now. So is there anything that like maybe teachers or parents or even their peers are able to do to kind of help combat the toxic masculinity?
That's a really good question. And so I think that a lot of it is, especially like with parents, is, asking their boys questions about how they're feeling and allowing them to have whatever response it is. A lot of times boys feel like the only acceptable response for them as boys is that either everything is okay or I'm angry. And kind of giving them spaces, and especially if they have male role models in their lives who can do that for them and kind of give them that space. Or similar with teachers, being able, giving them some of that space to talk about things, being able to model being able to model the behaviors that are so important in the things and those sorts of things. So like in boys group, one of the things that I like to do with them every week, the very first thing we do is I ask them to share with the group what's happening in their lives, like what something that happened the week before they want to talk about, or it's coming up in the next week that they want to talk about. So like the first couple weeks, it's a lot of video games, lots of stuff about Minecraft, lots of stuff about Fortnite, lots of stuff about YouTube channels that they're working on. And the important thing that I think I do in that, and that we all do, is we listen to them when they're talking. I know it's not necessarily particularly in grand scheme of things important, but it's important to them in that moment. And by demonstrating that the people in the group and that I am interested in the things that are important to them, usually after a couple of weeks, usually by about week 3 or so of the group, I'll get a kid who will share something else besides video games or sports. They'll share something fun that they did with their family, or something that they're looking forward to doing. And they see that they got a good response from the other kids in the group. The other kids see they got a good response. So then things begin opening up. And usually by about week 5 or so, I'll have a kid talk about something negative or upsetting that's happening, something that's happening that's hurt their feelings, or that they're scared or nervous about. And what happens when we do that is they immediately see that their peers are responding to them positively, that there's no making fun of them, Sometimes it's something like that a kid has been picking on them for the last several days, and they don't know what to do. They're scared about it, and they don't know what to do about it. And a lot of times, like, the kids in my group will say, "Well, just sit with us. Why don't you just come over and sit with us at lunch, or why don't you come over and play with us at recess?" And so,
so you're not only building that relationship with that student particularly, but you're also building those relationships amongst themselves.
Absolutely. And that's, I mean, one of the very first topics we talk about as a group is empathy and why it's important. And we talk about things that they can do. And so I always ask them, one of the questions we always do in that week is, so some of the kids in this school may not have anybody who they feel they can go to when things are bad. So what are some things you could do to be that person? And the kids always have really good basic ideas that to share with us. I can share the candy that I got in my lunch with them. I can tell them a joke that I really like. I can ask them if they want to come over later and play video games with me. I can ask them if they want to join our soccer game. And all of those sorts of things really go a long way towards building a lot of the other larger scale healthy masculinity skills that we're really looking for, because they do begin to feel like they have community, and then they begin sharing those with each other in the group. And I get a lot of reports from counselors of kids from my group doing those things for other people in their school, that they or their teachers have seen them doing those things for kids in their school. And so, like, and so sometimes even in groups where really awful things happen to kids over the course of when we are, maybe there's something serious happens with a parent or a grandparent, maybe they lose a pet, and the boys in the group frequently become massively just supportive of that other kid and understand, because they've been there too, and helping that kid feel like they're not by themselves in dealing with that.
Mm-hmm. Do you offer any coping? I know that you said, oh, well, there's people here who don't have anyone to go to. What can you do? But are there any coping tools that you can offer to those people in those situations?
Well, so one of the big things that we do to help them with a lot of those situations is we teach them things like bystander intervention skills, and we teach them assertive communication skills, so that they do learn how to communicate both how they're feeling or what they need with other people. That is a skill that seems to be lacking with a lot of kids, is that ability just to express yourself. And we do spend a lot of time with teaching them how to express that. And then also just kind of talking to them about things that they also for themselves that they can do if they're feeling overwhelmed. And that's always a lot of that's individual for each kid. So like a lot of kids find doing art, especially coloring, to be very helpful for that. Some kids find, physically creating something by building something to be something that, like with Legos or another kind of building set, to be very helpful. Some kids find their video games to be helpful. It all kind of depends, but we do talk about a lot of things about and have the kids share a lot of what they personally do. And then also part of this is me talking about things that I do to kind of help them see lots of different options and things that they may not have kind of previously thought about as things that could potentially be helpful.
Hey, so I have a question for you. So when we're talking about toxic masculinity, there's something that's always fascinated me about the topic. And so I grew up in the 80s and 90s, like you. And when I think back when I was a kid growing up in a really small community, I mean, there was, I think, 100 people in my graduating class. It was a pretty small community. But sometimes I can feel the emotions again, because how our mind doesn't really have a sense of time. When we think of something that bothers us, I still feel those emotions like it happened yesterday. But based on the information changes the situation. I do feel like there was times when I was growing up where what I believed was part of toxic masculinity, or no one actually told me these things. It's what I was hearing from other people So after a while, it's almost like I adapted that, and I felt like those pressures were put on me, even though no one was saying that. It's just almost like we hear things and we assume, well, that's what I have to do too. So it's these invisible stress that's not even there, but we believe it's there. What do you think about that?
I think that absolutely is true. I think that the adults that kids and teenagers are always watching the adults in their lives, and they're always watching them for cues on on how to behave. And so, like, for example, if you have a young boy 8 or 9 years old watching a football game with, maybe father, older brother, grandparent, uncles, whatever, and a player is on the hurt ground because they got hurt, or maybe a player gets a concussion or whatever, and people in the room watching the game, just in the spirit, a lot of times in the spirit of just being caught up in the game, start hollering for that player to get up and to be a man, to shake it off, all of those sorts of things. They're not talking directly to that kid. At least they don't think they are, but in many ways they are, and they are sending the message that that's a behavior that they need to do. Or if they're watching the news the news is on with adults, and they respond. One of the adults in the room responds to a man being emotional on TV or on a news story or wherever, or in a movie or wherever, by making fun of them or laughing at them or saying that they're not really a man. The kid is absorbing that, and the kid is hearing that. One of the things that is the idea of telling a child to be a man is a very dangerous thing, and for many kids, depending on the context that it's delivered in, it can be a very damaging sort of thing. And it doesn't mean that the adult meant harm by it. It may be that they see that their child is crying and upset, and they're trying to come up with a way just to get them to stop crying, and that's what they tell them. But that is sending a really strong message to those kids, even if it was not necessarily intended. And so it's just one of those things where you're always on. If you're in front of a kid, you're always on, you're always teaching, they're always learning from you and the other adults that they're around all the time.
And I appreciate how you keep saying the kid, because a lot of what, obviously I have different experiences than you two being a female, but a lot of what I'm hearing is like, I've heard those things, and so many things then as I was growing up was, okay, well, he's not allowed to be emotional, I have to be. And like, you're sending this message that boys have to be a certain way, but then in doing so, you're almost also sending boys a message of how they need to then expect women to act, and you're also sending a message to women how they need to be acting. And it reminds me a lot of, I want to say it was Dove, but Act or Play Like a Girl, that commercial. I think it was like a Super Bowl commercial.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like a girl, because there's plenty of things that females can do that men can do, and vice versa. So I appreciate that you're using the words children and not just specifically boys or specifically girls.
Absolutely, because if you have, for example, if you have a boy and a girl both in your home, and your daughter constantly hears you telling your son that boys are supposed to be in charge, your daughter is absorbing that information as well. And so this is one of the things about these masculinity standards is that they are damaging to people of all genders. They're not. It's not just one gender that's being damaged by them. It's all genders, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do by teaching kids these skills, is teaching them how to, giving them skills that are helpful for them, but are also going to be helpful for all of the other people who they have relationships with later on in their life.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder if my kids wake up and the first thing they think of is, gee, what mask am I wearing today? Who do I need to impress? Am I the tough guy today? Am I the smart kid today? Am I the funny kid today? Am I the cool kid today? It's almost like they're playing all these roles. They study so many other people, and then one day they wake up and they're 30 and they're like, I don't even know who I am. Like I've been trying to be everyone else. I don't even know me.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, Jason. And that's in boys group, that's one of the very first lessons. That's the second week. What we do is we read a story, especially with the 4th and 5th grade boys. We read a story called Henry Holton Takes the Ice. That's about a kid who grew up in a hockey playing family, and everyone in his family plays hockey, but he wants to be an ice dancer instead. But when he goes and asks his dad at first says, no, we're a hockey family. That's what we do. Mm. And then by the end of the story, his dad comes around and lets him be an ice dancer because he realizes that is what his kid needs in order to be happy and in order to be himself. And whenever we read that story, the boys that we read that have lots of feelings and lots of thoughts about that story. And this idea of that as long as what you're doing isn't something that's hurting other people or something that is going to get you into some sort of serious trouble, that it's okay for you to be you, right, and for each person to like the things that they like. Right. And that if you're a boy and you like playing sports, that's great. But if you're a boy and you don't like playing sports, that's also great. If you're a girl and you like playing sports, that's great. And teaching them that the importance of, in them and then in the other people who they spend their time with, of it being okay to be yourself and to like the things that you like and have the interests that you have. And can be a very important and powerful lesson, I think, for kids to learn.
Absolutely. And I think it's an important message, I feel, for parents and for teachers to learn too, because it's like you grow up with thinking that all your life, then it's like, I don't really fault you for passing that on, but that's not healthy to pass that on, type of thing.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of conversations with our teachers and our counselors that we work with about things in our programming and about things that they learned through our programming that they did not previously know, that they then now are equipped to pass on both to their own kids and just to other kids who they work with beyond just the class that they have in that moment. I also, whenever I'm talking about what I do just with other adults, I have a lot of adults who talk about that they wish that they had that sort of education and that sort of training, and when they were that age, that would have potentially for them made a significant difference in some of the choices that they made by having some of that knowledge.
Mm-hmm. But I think it's great, though, in a way, even though that seems sad, but it's almost like the people that's receiving your training, you're empowering them to say, hey, look, you've got this knowledge. Now it's your job to help spread that knowledge and give it to the next person so they can carry that on. So there is, if you think about it, there is one good thing about it is that they can empower someone else. At least that's what I try to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely true, because we can't fault people for not knowing what they've never learned before. But once you do learn something, there is responsibility that goes with gaining that knowledge of, now I need to do better. And now when I see other people or other people who I know who've never learned this, I need to be able to have those conversations with them and talk to them and give them this same piece of knowledge that I've just learned.
Now, because that's such an awkward or difficult thing to approach somebody about, what's a good way for people to kind of approach, like, hey, that's toxic masculinity and it's not cool. Like, what is a good way for someone to kind of interject themselves without seeming rude?
Oh, that's a very good question. And I'm really glad you asked, because being able to do this interjection is really important when we hear something that is a sexist joke, or we hear or we see people behaving in a sexist way or making homophobic comments or things like that. And it's crucial we be able to do that, especially when people who are the target of those jokes are not present, because that illustrates even more that it's not just about offending some other group, that it's about that what you have said is not okay with me. And so really a lot of it is, just talking to them, telling them how you feel about it, telling them why you don't think it's okay. A lot of times if I'm talking to men from my age group, I oftentimes will start with, okay, so I know that like when we were growing up, that we were exposed to this and this was presented to us as something that was okay. But something that, that I've learned is, and then talk to them about what I've learned about this that's different than how it was. And so that it doesn't make them feel like they themselves are a bad person, but helping them see that they're engaging in an unacceptable behavior. And that's one of the key things to it, I think, is addressing the behavior before and instead of addressing the person directly. Because even if somebody might agree with you, if they feel threatened or they feel called out, they're not going to respond positively to what you're saying. Whereas if you talk about the behavior, and especially if you can be honest and vulnerable and admit that you yourself used to make those kinds of jokes, or say, I know that in the past I might have laughed at that joke, but I don't find those sorts of things funny anymore. And then talk to them about why, and just helping them kind of, again, to think about this from perspectives other than their own. And, and a lot of times if somebody says, well, I'm just trying to make a joke, kind of pointing out that for a joke to work, that means that your audience has to find it funny, and therefore, and it's not. Or if they say you need to learn how to take a joke, just being firm in that and making and understanding that is an example of that reversal that I talked about earlier. That's them trying to make you the one with the problem, and it's not you.
Right.
And being able to be confident.
Hey, you've made me uncomfortable. Like, I don't like that. I'm not laughing.
Right. Absolutely. And then remembering that, like a lot of times people are afraid that if they say something like that, they're going to ruin the party or the night out or something like that. And remembering that you're not the one who ruined the party. The person who told that joke or made that comment or began catcalling your waitress, they are the one who chose to ruin that evening, not you. You, by trying to address it and explain and talk about it, are the one who's doing the responsible thing there.
Well, and I think like you touched on a good thing. Like, I think it's so important to realize that like it doesn't have to be a fight. It doesn't have to be this big whole thing that ruins, your evening or your outing or whatever. It could just be simple as, hey, I didn't care for that. Like, it didn't sit well with me. Let's not do that anymore. And then move on. I feel like right now, especially because like everyone's in quarantine, so everybody's online and they don't have people to talk to, so they look for that entertainment. But like, especially right now, people are just looking for fights and looking for ways to just attack each other, even when all you're simply doing is being like, hey, I'm not okay with that, which is healthy because you're setting your own boundaries.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that adults can do to model good behavior for children, is by setting their own boundaries and encouraging their kids to do the same. Yeah. And then the adults respecting those boundaries that their kids have established. And I know a lot of times for parents or for adult relatives, that can be hard sometimes getting used to, but it really is establishing a precedent for those kids that's going to be really important in all of their relationships, especially their friendships and dating relationships that they have for the rest of their lives, to be able to establish those strong and healthy boundaries with each other.
Yeah. Well, Jamie, this has been amazing. I feel like you definitely shed some light on, some very great topics. Where can people kind of find you guys, get in touch with you guys?
So we do have a website that is helplinedelmore.org that people can go and learn more about our organization, and our business line is on there. Okay. If somebody is in Delaware or Morrow County is in crisis, or needs help with these issues, we do have a 24-hour hotline and text line that people can contact us at. One of the things that's really important that we want to make sure is that teenagers know that, and kids know, that we work with everybody, and that includes them. Our hotline workers are trained in working in this areas and helping people and being advocates of people who have been sexually assaulted, who are experiencing relationship violence and dating abuse, or who just need help and support because they're worried about a friend, for example. They will not dismiss you because of your age, or not believe you because of your age. It's not like a doctor appointment, or it's not like calling the police. It's calling just somebody to get who's able to provide some help and some resources and provide you with that help. If it's something where they cannot provide direct help, they also do information referral, and so they can certainly help connect people to other agencies within the county that are able to provide for help that would be specific for that person's needs. And so, but for other kind of more broader general questions, they can certainly go to our website. Any of our contact information is on there, and we can certainly, help people with kind of any of these sorts of things that we've talked about today.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time, helping educate all of us. We really, really appreciate you being on this week with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I love talking about these topics, as Jason knows really well. And so I really appreciate the chance to be on and get to talk about a lot of these issues and a lot of just the work that our team does. I really like the work that our team does and has been able to do even under quarantine. Like, we have a prevention Facebook page as well. If you go to HelpLine Prevention Resources, there's a page that's solely about violence prevention and suicide prevention that people can go to. Nice. So thank you for having me this week.
Thank you. You guys are doing amazing work, and definitely, obviously, keep it up. I mean, I feel like people need you guys a lot right now. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you. You guys too.